I think we have all our panelists here, but not quite 3 o'clock yet. So if we want to wait a little longer to let people join. Okay, it's 3 o'clock. We maybe want to go ahead and get started. Graham, if you
That sounds great. Thank you, Rachel. Hi, everybody. We have a great group of people here to try to bring you up to date and answer questions and think together with you about some of the things that we're all wondering about as we're trying to get prepared to come back to school on April 19th. So we have a presentation that a number of us will participate in. I appreciate most of our principals are here today also to answer questions, and we'll try to get through as much as we possibly can. So you want to bring up the PowerPoint, Graham? I did see a question in the chat about if the CDC and the county moved the 6 foot to 3 foot, would we change how many students can attend? The answer to that would be likely, yes, we would. But I was on a Zoom with the county health yesterday, and they did not indicate that that was imminent. So if you have some information about that, Sonia, send it my way. I know you know my email, and I'd look forward to reading the details, because we specifically asked if there was going to be any shift in the distance and heard nothing. So doesn't mean it's not changed since, because everything's changing every minute. So this is our update. If you'll go to the next slide, Graham. So we understand that you probably already are aware that we have a new bell schedule. We're starting on the 19th, as I said. And this all can be found on our distance learning page. I hope you've noticed that the schedule is very similar to the distance learning schedule. And the object here is to still maintain as much of the instructional connection between students as teachers as we can. And it will be used for all classes starting the 19th. And I think that's an important step. And I think, go to the next one. I'm going to turn this over to Tom, who has helped us work on this one.
So as you can see with this bell schedule, as Polly mentioned, it is almost identical to what our students have experienced from August through today and up until April 19th. Wednesdays will remain fully asynchronous for all students. Not fully asynchronous, fully remote for all students, with the advisory and asynchronous learning time and opportunities for students to connect with their teachers virtually. But the Monday, Thursday, and the Tuesday, Friday schedules, as you can see, are largely unchanged. There's 5 minutes added here and there. We are going to be feeding students at brunch and lunch, so we had to make some just 5-minute alterations there, which I'm sure our students will figure out much quicker than some of the adults, but flexibility, of course, will be in place. One change that I would want to highlight is we did change the order on Tuesdays and Fridays. Currently, office hours are right after lunch from 1:15 to 2. And we have changed that. We have moved 6th period to right after lunch and ended the day with office hours. And office hours will be fully remote. You might wonder, well, why is that? Well, we want to make sure that to the greatest extent possible, we provide equitable opportunities for both the students who choose to engage from home or the students who are already in school choosing to come in person. And the students in person will have some opportunities with their teachers in the in the in-person environment. So office hours we've kept it for the remote students. And of course, those that are in person can head home and also have office hours on Wednesday. So there's plenty of opportunities for all students to get the additional help and support that they may need. Next slide. So what are the next steps towards in-person instruction? So we have just under half of our students have expressed on the survey, or parents of students, that they are interested in coming back to school in person. So because of the distance requirements that are currently in place, we can't have every student who wants to come in 4 days per week. So consequently, we're going to be dividing the in-person students into 2 groups, an A group and a B group. The A group will have the opportunity to attend in person on Monday and Tuesday. The B group will be attending Thursday and Friday. And as I mentioned earlier, the Wednesday schedule will remain unchanged. But whether you're the A group or the B group or the I'm choosing full remote, all students are going to have access to the teachers, whether it's through Zoom or in person. So I want to assure people that there's no loss in instructional time. Our periods are still 90 minutes per class, 180 minutes per week, exactly how it's been since August.
So I've noticed in the chat that there was a question about what if I want to change the response I gave on the survey? So as Tom shared, we were using the survey to gauge where interest would lie. But now we are moving into a commitment phase. So you do not need to submit the survey again. By the end of this, you will receive a commitment letter that is going to come out through Informed K-12. The email will have your child's name. So we hope that that will help you be able to keep a lookout for that email. Within that commitment, you will be offered the 3 options. So that is to continue with distance learning, to have your child continue with distance learning, but maybe they will be coming onto campus for things like clubs, extracurriculars, athletics. And the third option, which is to participate in person in the hybrid model that Tom was mentioning with the A-B schedule. There has been a question about how do students get chosen? It's actually done through our student information system and in Infinite Campus. And so it is done by the computer. We may make some adjustments just to confirm loading and those types of things, but it is being done by the process. So there is not a selection process in terms of, if your student happens to know someone in the class and, we're really just following the guidelines and dividing the classes in half. There have also been questions about what if my child changes their mind? So the commitment letter will provide for you some other guidelines, including our health and safety guidelines. If your child chooses in person and then decides that they would like to return to remote learning, that will take a phone call to school. If your child starts in continuing distance learning and they decide after maybe a week or two that they think maybe they do feel comfortable returning to campus, we will be establishing a process for that. So we will, once we have our schedule built, our groups built for the start, April 19th, then we will keep you updated about a process for opting into in-person learning. So we will keep you posted on that. Once we have received all the commitments, then we'll be creating those groups. And then our goal is to have those letters out to you confirming which group, if your students have chosen the in-person, which group, and what your schedule will be, what your child's schedule will be. That will come out by April 9th. If when you get the form, you have any questions, you need any assistance, please contact your school site. So in the confirmation letter, you will be directed to the health and safety guidelines. And just to highlight a few of those things that your student, you will be responsible for. I'm going to talk a little bit later about a symptom self-checker that will occur before the student comes onto campus. We are asking that students wear masks at all times except when they are eating. And we will continue to have masks available should a student forget to do that. We're asking that students we will have hand sanitizer available in all classrooms. We're asking them to take care of proper hand hygiene. And we will also have wipes available should they decide they would like to wipe down their desk or chair. And also all of our classrooms and our areas on campus will provide distancing So students will be reminded at all times about that 6 feet of social distancing.
So some of you may be wondering, what will instruction look like? Well, students should expect instruction to look similar to the remote teaching model. So there's an expectation of one lesson plan, which can be accessed both remotely and for the in-person students. And the students in person will also be on their own computer devices. So some of you might be wondering, what if my child doesn't have their own computer device that they can bring with them? We will loan students Chromebooks, much like we have during distance learning. We've been fortunate enough to be able to provide a Chromebook for every child that needs it. So in person will provide some opportunities for positive interactions with peers and adults. I just want to be cautioning people that they won't be the same that pre-COVID times allowed for. So group activities, students have to maintain 6 foot of distancing. Everyone's going to be masked. So because of these guidelines, the notion of 4 students peering over the same lab results is going to be a little bit different. As well as teachers circulating around the room the same way that they have done for their entire careers, that also is going to be very limited by distancing guidelines. So it'll be an adjustment, but as it says in the last bullet, our teachers remain committed to providing learning opportunities for all students, whether it's through in-person or through remote learning. And I would add that, you know, the first couple weeks will likely be less smooth than the month of May. I would say that the instruction in August was probably less smooth than it was by mid-September. This is an adjustment, but every time an adjustment has been needed, our teachers have stepped up, and I'm confident that they will again.
Okay, this next slide addresses the school offices or campus offices. And, you know, the school staff has largely been working on a rotation for the last year. So some people have been in the office every day, but others have been, you know, working from home. But we are asking the office staff to begin to return to work on March 26th to prepare for the opening of school. But as they come in, they will be wearing masks, and we'll be keeping them 6 feet apart. And also, you know, they'll have barriers between them in some of the locations. So what we'd like to ask the public and parents to do is to continue to access the office staff as they have throughout the last year, which would be primarily by email, phone calls, and Zoom calls. We are going to have some tables out in front of the offices during high student demand times, such as lunch and brunch, where a person would be seated out in front of the office and they could talk to a real person. We will also have contact numbers posted on the office windows and door area where you can get the right number to call somebody if you need to. We would encourage you to handle all routine business that way. But it is a school, and occasionally we will have emergencies and unexpected things where students will need to talk to people inside the office in person, and they're certainly there for that, and we will open the doors and have people come in those situations. But for routine things, we'd like to keep it either by email, phone, or by Zoom calls. Okay, the next slide talks about how we're trying to keep students and staff members safe. And so for the last few months, we have been having a full HVAC assessment. And so HVAC stands for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. And so we've had all the classroom areas inspected to make sure that they have the right airflow, and also checking the filters. And so the MERV 13 filter is recommended as the best filter to protect students and staff members from germs that are transmitted. And that's the type that we have installed in all of the classrooms now. We also have a large stock of personal protective equipment, including masks, gloves, cleaning supplies, and barriers. And so the state's been generous in providing those to us. And early in the emergency, there were some supply chain problems, but those have been largely corrected. And we are instructing the custodians to maintain a rigorous effort for cleaning and disinfection at night. And disinfecting the high contact areas is something we're certainly looking at. And Trudy, I think the next bullet's for you on that one.
Yes. We have a very in-depth process by which we support the reporting of any close contacts or positive cases. And we do that in coordination with county directives and also with the establishment of a COVID designee on each campus. So I'm the designee for the district and I coordinate with the county and then ensure that our sites are aware of all of our structures. So we have been asked questions in the past in regards to how will I be notified if my student was a close contact. So if a student or teacher tested positive and that had a connection to an activity or a classroom group that your child was in, then you would receive contact from the school site, from our designee at the school site, and that's always in coordination with me. In addition, we have already established a process by which we do provide notification to staff and families when there has been exposure. So we don't provide specific details about the exposure, but we do say that there has been a case reported and that if you were a close contact, you would have been notified, but the site designee's information is always included and mine is too, so that if there are any questions, people are welcome to follow up, to answer, to talk through any concerns that they might have. I also mentioned previously, we have a self-screening tool. It is by a company called Qualtrics, and we have launched that almost a month ago with our staff. And so currently all staff, whether they come on campus or not, receive an email in the morning, every morning, so that they can do a self-screening. If they are not coming to campus, then it opts them out of the self-screening pieces, which would be the same for students. And if they are, they answer some COVID-directed symptom questions. So Graham will look at the next slide, which will give us a little more detail.
I just want to say, I think Christine, Mallory, I skipped over your bullets. I don't know if you want to say anything about more about PPE or cleaning and disinfection.
Oh, no, I think you covered it well, Graham.
Okay, next slide then.
So there have been some questions in the Q&A about option 2, and I want to mention option 2 because students who are choosing option 2 or option 3, this screening tool will apply to you, to your child. So option 2 is if for instructional class purposes, your child is going to continue at home, but they are involved in a club, they are involved in athletics, they're on robotics or another extracurricular, and they would be coming on campus for that activity, then that's option 2. Option 3 is if they are coming onto campus for class, and it could be also that they're coming on for activities as well. So for either of those options, students will receive an email, the top left email here, every morning. And as they go through the responses, they will be asked questions. Are you going to come on campus or are you not expected on campus today? So for instance, no one will be expected on campus on Wednesdays. On the A or B days, students will still get an email, but they would just say they're not expected on campus. And if they don't endorse any that they're not feeling well, then they will get this blue house that's in the bottom right. And that means that they are expected to be home that day. If they fill out the survey and they do not endorse any COVID symptoms or any COVID exposure, such as a close contact or themselves being a positive case, then they will receive the green check in the upper right side there. And if they do endorse any symptoms or COVID exposure, they will get the red X. And the thing that we will do with the red X is our school sites will follow up so that we know and can help the family and the student in terms of symptoms or exposure or any next steps. Students who are at home due to illness, If they are well enough to be online, because I know this is another question that has come up, they can Zoom in from home and continue to participate if they are feeling well. One thing that we do want to emphasize is we have a process by which if students develop symptoms associated with COVID during the school day, that they will be met by a staff member and the home will be contacted and the student will either be picked up or can be released by the parent to walk home. It is important that the family, either the family doctor or a healthcare professional, does review the symptoms. And if the student is to return to school, a medical note will be necessary. So it may not, the physician may determine it's not necessary to test for COVID. There might be another explanation for what's going on. And so the medical note would provide us the information that an evaluation has been completed. That can be by telehealth. And that if there's an alternative reason for the symptoms that are not COVID, what is that reason? And that the testing, COVID testing, was not indicated. It may be that a student is tested and then if they're positive or negative, can provide that information to the school site and we will follow up accordingly. One other thing that we want to emphasize is that all of our safety procedures continue to be listed on the website. And so we have detailed information about how we respond when students have symptoms, if they've been a close contact, if they themselves are a positive case, all the information about masks and social distancing, all of those types of things are listed in our guide and in that safety protocol area. And again, if you have any questions, certainly you may follow up with your school site or with me directly.
So planning for the remainder of the school year, obviously you've been seeing some return of additional school activities in the last week, and that's going to continue. We're planning for additional athletics to return and looking forward to some of the actual football games that are coming up. But the other thing we're going to do is we're going to sort of reconstitute the task force we had at the beginning. We called it the COVID-19 task force, and we will be contacting folks who were on that task force. And we've also contacted principals and gotten some names of students and staff and some of our managers, a couple of our board members, and of course, parents who would be on that committee to work through the details as we move forward. I think it's helpful when you can participate in understanding some of the things that might lead to a particular decision. From the outside looking in, it sometimes can seem obvious what we should or shouldn't be doing. But there are some different details that will be helpful for this committee to understand and know so that they can help the rest of the community understand all the parts of the decisions we're trying to make. So we're really excited. I got a wonderful text from one of our administrators that last week she was on one of the school campuses listening to the band play, seeing kids heading out to do practice, running into a parent she knew. And just seeing kids going to a variety of different things that they love, masked, distanced, outside, but safe and excited. And so we are very thrilled for this opportunity, and we continue to do our due diligence to make sure we're following all the protocols required of us by the CDC and County Health. So we look forward to some of your questions and any other thoughts that you might have. And I know there's a lot in the chat, so I'm going to ask Rachel to read some things and help us with that.
Sure. I know we've answered a lot so far, which is great. We do have a question about if there are restrictions for students who might want to come back for in-person attendance, but they traveled during spring break.
Trudy, you're welcome to answer this. My understanding is that there's really no quarantining anymore, but let's hear the detail.
That's accurate. So the county and the state continue to recommend that individuals not travel or limit their travel. But if they do travel, there's no longer the 10-day quarantine following, it used to say outside of 150 miles. there's no longer any quarantine, and the district will not be adding anything. We follow the state and county requirements. So there will be no required quarantine following spring break travel.
Thank you, Trudy. There are a lot of questions about lunchtime in the chat, and I probably can't summarize them all, but where on campus will students be eating? How are we doing this? How are we gonna keep students apart and maintain that distancing?
I know that all of our campuses are working now to sort of mark what 6 foot looks like outdoors. And if it's going to be on benches, it's going to be in the stadiums, it's going to be anywhere we think kids would congregate, so to speak, with distance. So we can help remind them what that looks like, especially if they're eating, because the masks will be off. I would tell you our cafeterias are preparing for what can they do so that they don't have kids in line right behind each other serving food. It's probably going to be more of a grab and go model. We've had some robust discussions about whether we would allow off-campus opportunities. And although we haven't finalized that decision, it's pending some information from CDC for me. I have talked to some colleagues in neighboring districts. Palo Alto has tried a closed campus in the beginning and thinks if we go to Orange, they may move to an open campus, but they're unsure of that right now. It somewhat depends on how many students they have coming back. I think one thing we all said was, if we have an open campus, it's good because it's part of the culture. It's part of what we're all used to. But some of the challenges are that we can't fully control our kids all together in a car going somewhere. Are they maintaining the distancing and working and getting together with other groups of kids off campus where we can't be the reminder? So we have some worries about that. And I think we're trying to approach it cautiously, but the decision hasn't been made finally. I don't know if that's helpful, but are there more parts to the question, Rachel? Or would a principal like to weigh in?
Covered most of them, I hope. We have some questions about siblings. Would they be able to, even if families can't choose if they're the A group or the B group, will we prioritize siblings to be on the same day? Will students who are struggling, especially special ed, might have an opportunity to come back for 4 days instead of 2? That's 2 different sort of questions there.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer those. So in regards to siblings, yes, that is something that we will consider within the way that Infinite Campus loads the schedules. One other thing I want to point out is it's been suggested to me the primary parent within Infinite Campus is the parent that will receive the email. So that might help you look out for the commitment letter. We also have had discussions about students with disabilities, English language learners, at-risk students. So as we see the load into the system, we will be considering if we can offer them a 4-day schedule. So that's something that we are working on. We've not made a decision, but we are looking into, we do understand that that's something that could be very beneficial to that. We also want to balance that with what I mentioned before, which is we know that there may be some students and families who after a week or 2 decide that they do feel comfortable returning. So we're trying to create systems to address both of those.
Thank you, Trudy. What is the plan for students who have a free period while they are on campus? Are they allowed to leave? Will there be a designated area for them?
I know we haven't made this decision fully. Would a principal like to field that one from your perspective so you can talk about the pros and cons?
I can. Hi, this is Cami Tomerlane. I'm from Cupertino, and it will depend, quite frankly, on a number of factors. If we don't have a closed campus, then certainly there could be some movement on and off, and we're still figuring that out. That's what we've done in the past if students had an open period. We'll also set up either a classroom or another public space like our mezzanine. I know some of my colleagues are talking about a cafeteria or a library, so that students who need to remain on campus because they have a class coming up would have a place to be, that they could work, and that they could remain in a safe distance from other people. So we're working on those details. I can't tell you exactly what that space will look like, but I know it will happen. We will have a plan before they get here.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. Cami mentioned some of us are taking a look at our student unions, our cafeterias. And for example, at Monte Vista, our plan is to put in student desks and student chairs into that area, obviously distanced correctly so that students could access that. What's nice about that area is, we've got the big doors that we can open, for airflow, not just the great ventilation that already exists, but we can also open those 3 big doors. So that's one of the reasons we're thinking about that space.
We have a question about the fall, if there's going to be a survey in the fall for families to make a decision, or maybe just share what we're thinking right now for the fall.
As with the change that we've had from 2 months ago to now, everything depends on the kind of guidance that we're getting. And we know that there may be some families that for various reasons wish to continue in remote learning in the fall, and we will be supporting students as fully as we can. And the details of those plans aren't fully vetted yet, to be honest. We're trying to do first things first. We definitely will be looking to parents to see what their thoughts are about returning their child in the fall. And we're hoping that that distancing is reduced in such a fashion that we can almost come back normally or come back normally. So all of those are going to be factors, and we will definitely be communicating with families so that you can give us your input.
Have we been providing teachers with resources or training for adjusting to this new model? What are we doing to support teachers during this shift?
Tom, you want to field that one?
Sure. We have a group of teachers known as curriculum leads in the 4 major curriculum areas of science, math, social studies, and English, as well as guidance. And they've been working together, and they've crafted kind of a guideline document of promising practices for the concurrent classroom. We've also been working with the coordinator of technology, Menko Johnson of instructional technology, to make sure that we have the right instructional tools in technology, as well as ensuring to the greatest extent possible appropriate bandwidth so that the educational environment can be maintained so that students can access from home and from school through the best possible means. So yes, that's what we're doing so far.
Any principal want to add to that, Greg, or anybody? Maria, Brian?
I'll jump in. I know all of our sites have library media teachers. They've been working really closely with Menko Johnson at the district level to help our teachers with all the technology transitions that they've had to make all year. And I know that that support will continue as teachers make their way back to the classroom and now are kind of in a hybrid setting.
I'll also say, I mean, we've been in the PLC model for quite a while, and so a lot of that work takes place within the teacher groups themselves. So as they're working together, they're trying to figure out what's going to be the best mode of instruction and things that they'll do as they make that transition back in.
And individual teachers are approaching us about their individual needs. Sometimes their technology needs, sometimes their PPE needs. We're looking at masks that are see-through masks so that facial expressions are part of the interaction that sometimes are so important. So we're trying to supplement in those ways as well, kind of give them what they need to do their work.
Ryan, you referenced the PLC model. Do you want to explain what that means to the parent community?
Sure. So in our district, collaboration has been a big part of the teaching work that we do. And so teachers are grouped together based on essentially course alike. So our 9th grade English teachers work together around what's the content for 9th grade English. So what are our essential learnings? What is it we're going to assess students on? What do we hope that they achieve by the end of a particular assignment, lesson unit, et cetera? And so they're working together to really talk about, as we transition from fully remote to this hybrid model, how do we then implement some of the things that we want to do? So professional learning community is what the PLC stands for.
Thank you. If teachers are teaching in person, why do in-class students still need laptops or Chromebooks?
Tom or somebody else?
Cami.
Jump on that. I think there's going to be a combination of what's going on in person. Some of it will be direct. Students might be able to have a conversation while students on online or having that conversation in a breakout room or something like that. But students are still going to be interacting with one another, including those who are at home and those that are in the classroom. And so they can do that on a lot of technological tools like Schoology, like Jamboards or Padlets. And so it was helpful for every student to have that technological device in front of them, that laptop or that phone that would allow them to do that, so that they can continue to create one community as and have digital access to their assignments, which will still be loaded in Schoology, digital access to Google Docs and that sort of thing. So it's a tool that teachers will be using to meet the needs of the students who are in the room as well as the students who are at home.
Tammy. Some school districts are considering summer school as a mandatory catch-up period since some learning has maybe suffered during this period. Will we be doing any additional required summer courses or considering a late year end or early start in the fall?
We haven't decided, we have not considered or thought it would be necessary or even advantageous to change our calendar for ending later, starting earlier. I know we've done some thinking about how to augment our summer school, and also we've thought about some transitional kinds of classes, helping our current 8th graders get to 9th grade, current 9th graders get more oriented to school if they're not coming back now, and so forth. But Tom, do you want to answer more of that?
So we are not considering any mandated summer things like that, but I want to point out that, first of all, throughout this distance learning experience, many of our students have experienced a great deal of success. And we also recognize that some students have struggled. So we have been implementing intervention programs throughout the year. And so our goal is to make sure that students don't fall too far behind. And whenever we start a new school year, the first thing teachers do is they assess where the students are. And there's been great recognition that all of us have gone through various extent a traumatic experience this past 12 months, and which will continue to some degree in the next 3 months. And so, as Brian mentioned, our course like PLC, professional learning communities, are going to have to look at where are our students, what skills might need more reinforcement, and they will address those needs when we figure out where the students are. And ultimately, our students will be successful. It's one thing Fremont Union High School District students, especially with teacher and parent support, have always been a hallmark for us. And so I'm very confident that with that continued support, we will be successful in meeting any gaps or supports that need to be met.
Thank you, Tom. There's a couple different questions about COVID testing, surveillance or asymptomatic testing. Do we have plans for that for our staff and or students?
Well, right now, based on the guidelines, we are not required to do testing. You have to be above a certain threshold of cases per 100,000. We are way below that. In fact, we're heading towards orange as next Wednesday. So we're even further, we're less than half of what the requirement would be. So we are not planning to have asymptomatic testing or random testing at this point in time. We are working on testing for some of our indoor athletes because that is a different matter. They will be in closer contact. There won't be as much distancing, and that would be preferable. Right now, parents have been helping us out by going to get that testing, and the state has been a little slow to roll things out, but we're working on a variety of options to see what we can do for that group. Should that change, we've been doing a lot of trial and error around testing. It's a very time-consuming process, but perhaps if we had random testing or volunteer testing, it would be less impactful on instruction. But we're going to follow the guidelines, whatever they are. But right now, the random testing for every student or students on campus isn't required.
Thank you, Polly. We have some questions about freshman orientation and what other supports might be in place for freshman students who've never been to our campuses.
I can jump on that one. I know all the principals have talked about this, and we're doing a variety of different things, but we are looking at ways to bring our freshmen to campus, perhaps that week before spring break, and doing in small, safe groups, be able to take them around, show them around. We're also trying to do some videos for freshmen, and we're also trying to think about our sophomores too, who really were only on campus for half a year before they went away as well too. So we're looking to see if there's a way to do some reorientation for the sophomores, and so we're trying to really look at those days before spring break as a possibility.
Thanks, Greg. We had a couple of questions about the final schedule, if that has been finalized and published yet, and also if there will be a difference for in-person versus remote students taking their finals.
We do have a final schedule. Might there need to be little 5-minute adjustments because of passing period changes? There might be, but the final schedule will be the same for remote and in-person students. But certainly making the appropriate adjustments for brunch and things like that will happen. And Rachel, you might know if there's a final schedule on websites yet, or maybe the principals do. So it may be up already. I'll pause there and let others chime in.
It's up on our website that shows the schedule for finals for second semester. We have not really talked about whether that will be everybody will take the test remotely or everybody will take them in person. We haven't really talked about that, but that is the schedule is there so that people can plan their availability.
Yeah, thank you, Cami. Because what people might be wondering is it's not broken yet into like 2 cohorts.
We have a question about how parents might be able to help or volunteer, and if they've had the vaccine, would they be allowed to do that?
Yeah, I think we're certainly looking for, we're going to be looking for help. And the details of what that is going to continue to emerge as we make our plans and we test things out and we see how the first few days go. But I know we've talked about parents who could be useful in a variety of ways. I don't know if any of the principals want to jump on that one and say anything, or Graham or others who've been involved in these discussions. But anyway, we love help. Don't walk by our schools twice. We'll grab you.
We've actually used some parents for some of our virtual tutoring sessions. And that's been going really well. There's been some conversation about could we transfer that to, because actually before we went away in March, we actually had some parents on our campus during tutorial who were working with students who maybe were struggling in English or math. So that's always an area that we're definitely considering and looking at. So tutoring and that kind of volunteer has been great.
And I know that we've also at Lynbrook, and I'm sure at the other schools too, really appreciated parent volunteers who've come to help do the timing for swimming events, because they've been so important to making those events happen for our kids, and we really appreciate their help with that.
We have some questions about the libraries. Will they be open, or how are we running some of those larger spaces?
I can talk a little bit about Monte Vista. We're looking at the student union as being the place to be able to open for students to be. We have a modernization that's occurring on campus and in one of our bigger buildings, D building. And that does mean we have some teachers, sharing rooms, and to do our best in terms of giving teachers a space away from the other teacher when they have classes. We're looking at the possibility of using our library as that space for our teachers during their ERAPs, or the times when they don't have a class. So we're a little bit kind of trying to still work that out at Monte Vista, but that's kind of our thinking right now.
Thanks, Ben. We've had a couple questions about families. Could students come for part of a day, or only come for certain classes that they prefer, or a half day? And I know we answered some in the chat, but maybe we could just clarify here.
You want to tackle that one, Graham?
Actually, it would sort of depend. Like if you have a hole in your schedule, and let's say it's the first class of the day or the last period of the day, that's typically how we would try to arrange a schedule. So that student wouldn't really need to come until their classes started. If it was a whole the schedule in the middle of the day, I think some of the principals have mentioned they're trying to set up places where students could go and work. They could work on homework, other things, but it would be in a socially distanced appropriate area.
I think in terms also of just being flexible throughout the day, like I want to be here for first because I want to be with my teacher and I think it's important, but second isn't so important. Remote's working well for me. And then, back and forth. I think that makes it very challenging for us to continue to do the kind of attendance requirements that we have for the state, and also just knowing where kids are supposed to be. We have a responsibility to tell you as parents whether kids are there or not. And if you've opted for in-school attendance and for some reason your son or daughter is home for a particular period or for the entire day, you'll get an attendance call, because we have an obligation to let you know if your child isn't where we anticipated they should be. Doesn't mean that they weren't truly missing class if they were home doing it on Zoom. Doesn't mean we can't excuse it, but it does mean we need to let you know. But the randomness of that would be very challenging for us to manage. And so we're asking people for the 6 weeks that remain to stick to one side or the other. We will allow as much flexibility at least one time in that 6 weeks for you to choose to come back. And we will allow, it's easier to allow flexibility for kids to choose to go full remote. So we'll do as much as we can to be flexible, like Graham said, first and last period. But the other pieces are really about our trying to honor the fact that we want to be responsible for the students that are in our care.
We've had a couple of questions about the survey results, what they were, if we could speak generally to that. Also, if we could share it out by grade or by site another way.
I don't know if we have it to share. I don't have any problem with sharing it. We could put it up. Maybe, is there a place on the website that would be appropriate, Rachel?
Sure. We would just, I think, put it in our same hub.
Okay. The page with the other COVID information. We can put that out there. That's no problem.
Is it correct to assume though about half this, is it about half that chose to come back? Is that about right in general terms, Rachel?
I would say a little less than half. Yeah, it was a fairly even split, but a little bit more towards remaining remote.
And if I remember the results, it was consistent with only a couple percentage difference points between the 5 schools. And I don't recall seeing it by grade level, but that's my recollection. And we can certainly post it, as Polly said.
Regarding PE class, if students are not allowed to use the locker rooms, will they be expected to wear PE clothes all day during school before and after PE class?
No, we won't be expecting them to wear PE uniforms but we cannot use the locker rooms. It's just too challenging to supervise that and be sure we keep the safety distance. High touch surfaces would be all over in a place like that, and it would take a level of cleaning that would be significant. But we would say that PE teachers will work with students to say what they should wear, like comfortable shoes and so forth, to be prepared to do the activities that are in school. And maybe if we get fewer restrictions, we can open up locker rooms later on before the year ends.
Do we have any concerns about students that are staying remote having advantages over in-person students during testing with easier access to materials? And will there be any difference between how students are graded with exams?
Tom, you want to try that one?
I can try, but no, our teachers are well aware that if you gave a high stakes exam to students at home at the same time you're giving it to students who you can watch in front of you, that there is a temptation for inconsistent or violations of academic honesty. So our teachers are well prepared for that. They've had to adjust their assessments throughout the year for these type of things. And I know that our course-alike teams, our teachers have been talking together about how we can do this best, and keeping in mind that it has to be a level playing field to the best extent possible. So I don't have a pat answer, and certainly maybe the principals have had closer conversations with their teams about it, but it is definitely something that our teachers are working on and working to figure out.
We have a couple of questions about senior activities. Will there be a graduation? Will there also have an opportunity for a prom or grad night of some kind? Just wanting any details we can share.
I'm going to turn it to Trudy, but I would say this is something we're still waiting direct guidance from the CDC. And it's a little frustrating because we've been waiting a long time for the state to weigh in on this, but we've been planning, and Trudy's going to talk about that.
So as Polly said, we are waiting. The state is due to give us guidelines specific to graduation. It continues to be our goal to hold in-person graduation ceremonies. So we're waiting to find out what that group size parameter is and other structures that we need to consider, because we may need to have multiple ceremonies in order to provide an opportunity to students, families, and the number of staff that we need to staff the event. So we have to keep all those pieces in mind in terms of what our overall capacity would be for any graduation ceremony we hold. Our activities assistant principals and I have been meeting every week this year because we're trying to stay on top of, making sure our students do feel engaged socially and connected to their school. The question about prom has been something we've discussed quite a bit. It's very difficult to imagine a socially distanced prom. I know that our schools are trying to find other opportunities, but at this point, it looks like those proms either have not been scheduled or at sites are scheduled not to occur. So I know sites are working with their students to understand those pieces. In terms of grad night, the focus this year on grad night is a socially distanced event through Great America. And each of our schools has the opportunity to participate in that, and information would come out to the families through grad night or PTSA, whichever organization it is that is connected at your school, in terms of exactly what that would look like. But we are focused on having a grad night that can really comply with the county ordinances, which is why having a large venue like Great America can really help out with that. And for those of you who have any connection with the class of 2020, there also will be information coming out very soon about a July class of 2020 grad night, because we had promised them that when we were able, we would put something together for them. And so we have parents that have been very committed to that and are in the process of getting ready to sell tickets.
Thank you, Trudy. What happens if a teacher is exposed to COVID or tests positive? Would they be teaching virtually, and then would there be another adult or sub in the classroom, or what do we envision that looking like?
Yeah, I think we definitely envision having another adult in the classroom, or possibly some of these bigger spaces if that's a better solution. But that if the teacher's not well enough to come to school because they've been exposed, but they are well enough to teach, possibly they would be doing a Zoom from home. So we're going to work on those situations as they come up, but the plan would be to have additional adults in the classroom. So if students had that class in their in-person schedule, they could still have a place to go.
What are our plans in terms of emergency drills and preparedness for the rest of the year? Will we be having those once students are back on campus?
Yeah, actually, we were just talking about that today at Homestead. We are required to do them. And so we were talking about how we would make that like a fire drill is usually the first one that we do. And so looking to do a fire drill in that first 3 weeks and do it for both sides. We would also need to, at some point, go through our code red drills and go through all sorts of things. And we also, like every other campus, we're going to have some construction on our campus. So we have to teach students and staff new ways to get off campus or get to the muster point. So that is definitely part of our planning.
Thank you, Greg. We had a couple questions about, will there be any hands-on activities, labs, that kind of thing this year?
I'm happy. So I don't think we should expect labs necessarily in science. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the idea of 4 students congregating around a lab table and looking at results, analyzing them, and making an argument together isn't going to be possible with distance learning. But as some of the parents have seen through their students, our science teachers in this case, and other teachers in other subject areas have developed alternate ways in which to accomplish the same objectives through remote means. And what that'll look like for those students that are in person is something that the course-like teams are working on. So there'll be opportunities for the learning objectives to be met, even though it won't be the same as the hands-on labs or other group problem-solving experiences have been prior to COVID-19.
If a student does not follow the health protocols, keep their mask on and social distance, what are the disciplinary procedures? Would a student immediately be removed from campus and not allowed to come back?
Well, I think first of all, what you ought to know is that you as a family are going to be signing a document if you're wanting the child to return that sort of explains all those requirements. So you and your child will have both signed something that is clear what the expectations are, so that's going to be clear up front, and that is what we're going to expect. And I'm going to let Trudy answer that, and then I'm hoping principals will weigh in as well.
I apologize. I was answering Q&A. Could you tell me what we're talking
This
about?
is about what happens if a kid doesn't follow protocols about mask wearing or distancing.
Yes, thank you. So we do have, we've been working with our principals and our campus climate assistant principals and deans to create a process by which we will immediately address the issue with students. We really want to go about it in an information way from the beginning. So, but we do understand that this is a very serious issue. So if some form of discipline, removal from campus, etc., then those are part of our plan. We do recognize that it is very clear from the state that if students are not complying, they may be asked to leave the campus. So we want to provide some information and some counseling, and then have them leave the campus if they are not willing to comply. So we're trying to balance that so that we're supporting the student, but also making sure that all of the students and staff, individuals on campus are safe and know that we stand by the need to have social distancing, to have masks on at all times.
We have a question about whether we know what percentage of teachers and staff are currently vaccinated.
Rachel, you might be better at answering this than any of us.
So we did do some voluntary surveys, and in our second one, about 535 staff members responded out of 1,000 employees. That showed that between folks who had had either their first dose, both doses, or were in the pipeline for an appointment, I would say we were about 94, 95%. But again, this is voluntary information that was provided by our staff.
And that was also similar to the percentage given to us by Jason Heskett, the head of the teachers union, the president of the teachers union. And I don't know, Graham, or if any of you or anyone's on the call that has heard anything about CSEA's, our classified employees rate of vaccination, nothing separate from that.
Nothing separate, no.
Okay. So I would say that a
you
lot.
mentioned you wanted to take a look at the survey results. We do have those numbers. If you want to just put it up there quickly before we close.
Sure.
Okay, so you can see it's by school, and we're looking at district-wide 71% respond to the survey. You can see for each school what their numbers are. And then you see at Cupertino High School, 1,718 responded, 651 for hybrid, and 999 remote, and their numbers are by grade. So then you can see the numbers for Fremont, Homestead, Lynbrook, and Monte Vista. So district-wide, about 3,152 hybrid and 4,140 remote.
Thank you, Graham. Maybe we can take one more question before we close. There's a couple about if a teacher is not returning, perhaps because of a medical or other reason that prevents them, will the students have a substitute for the rest of the year? Will their teacher possibly be teaching from home? How will that work?
Well, I'll try it, and I'm going to ask Tom to back me up or Graham to back me up here. So the answer to that is going to vary depending on the situation. right? If the situation is such that there's a reason for them, that the ability to teach from home is enough to make it possible for them to teach, and they have a legitimate, based on medical, I don't mean everybody's got a legitimate reason, but based on some medical information, they can do that safely from home and they need to be at home, then the answer is they could very well be teaching from home. And if they can't, we every year have a number of teachers who are on leave for a wide variety of reasons, and we are accustomed to accommodating that with substitute teachers. And then there'll be a substitute. So we're working through that process and working with individual teachers who have situations like I'm sure everyone on this call has. I'm doubting that anyone on this call hasn't faced some kind of struggle about how hard it is for you to be home and shelter in place, and how hard it is for you to be back at work and manage that when you've got children who might be on different schedules. So all of these things are true for all of you on this call, I'm guessing, and they certainly are true for our staff as well. So we're working through each of these circumstances so that we can support them and also be sure that kids get the best possible instruction they can.
Thanks.
I don't
Molly.
have anything to add to that other than, yeah, we do have a process in place through our human resources department. And it's, as Polly said, it's nothing new. We always have teachers who have different medical needs that may require accommodation. And then we go through what's known as an interactive process, which is no different, I think, than the business world. And then we determine whether or not the restrictions can be accommodated or not. And we plan to follow the same process in this case.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for answering those questions. It looks like we got almost 220 answered in the chat. I know there's still some that we didn't get to, but we appreciate everyone asking those and helping.
So I just want to say a big thank you for everyone who's attended this session. We're going to try to have another one. Am I right? It's on the 5th. Is that right, Rachel?
I believe that is correct.
Yeah. And so we're going to keep trying to give as much communication as we can. I know there's going to be communications based on the sites, and our principals are working to communicate with different groups of families and kids, as well as the whole family of their school. And we're just going to keep talking and listen to what you have to share with us so that we can make this process as smooth as possible and successful as possible. So we look forward to continuing to talk with you about this, and we're all eager to get back as soon as we can. So thank you so much for your time today.
It was shown as if it was hung on.
Yeah, it was hung, it was locked up. Yeah. So I was closing all the stuff. Yeah, it was giving me a hard time.
God, I finished without that last question to give you time to go on to your next meeting.
Yeah. I know. Oh, I'll be a little late.